Good evening. It is a great pleasure to welcome all of you for this event, which is probably the 170th event of our series. Today we have a special guest. We have Mr. Rajiv Kumar, an eminent personality who needs no introduction, but still, I would take this opportunity of presenting before you a small snippet of his achievements. Dr. Rajiv Kumar is the chairman of the Pehle India Foundation, a non-profit making research think tank. He is the former vice chairman of Niti Aayog. He is currently member Global Leadership Council GASP New York. He is also a director on Pehle India Foundation. He serves as the chancellor of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune, and chairman of the Board of Governors of the Giri Institute of Development Studies, Lucknow. He has a wide experience of having worked in academia, government, industry, as well as in multilateral institutions. He started his academic career in the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, ICRIER, as a researcher during 1977 to 82. He later became the director and CEO of ICRIER between 2006 and 2011. A professor at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, IIFT, and a senior fellow at Center for Policy Research, Delhi. In the government, he was economic advisor with Department of Economic Affairs, DEA, Ministry of Finance from 1991 to 1995, and a senior consultant at the Bureau of Industrial Costs and Prices, BICP, Ministry of Industry from 1989 to 1991. His experience in the multilateral financial institutions was with the Asian Development Bank, ADB Manila, where he spent 10 years before returning to India in 2004. He was also the chief economist of the Confederation of Indian Industry during the period 2004 to 2006 and Secretary General of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, in the period 2011 to 2013. He served on the central boards of State Bank of India for 2 terms and also on the board of Reserve Bank of India. He has a PhD in economics from Lucknow University and a DPhil from Oxford University. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Rajiv Kumar to please come and address the gathering.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for that introduction. Whenever I hear that, actually these days I begin to feel that whether I have been really a rolling stone or have I gathered any moss at all. So that's for us to decide. But yeah, and it's a pleasure to be here back in Madras School of Economics. I've been here twice before, earlier incarnations, and always a pleasure to come back to Chennai in any case. And thanks to my friend Mr. Gopal Srinivasan for arranging this. And I noticed, because I was getting briefed by Sabri today, that the Chennai International Center is actually doing great work, and many, and bringing culture and all academics, etc., to the city. So congratulations for that, Gopal, as well. So today, before I have the next half an hour for myself, and I hope I'll provoke you all enough to then ask me searching questions. What I want to do is to say that, what is the vision that we should have for India at 100? But notice that I call it Bharat at 100, simply because I want all of us to be very conscious of this duality which exists between Bharat and India. And that exists. And the longer it exists, the worse, the more difficult it becomes for us. And this duality, so the development has to be in Bharat for it to catch up, and therefore we should really think about Bharat would be at 100 rather than India. And I started this work when I was in Niti Aayog, because the Prime Minister had asked us to talk, to say about what India would be. And that work started with some numbers and scenario building, etc. But that for me I thought was not, I started this work, as I said, when I was in Niti Aayog, but I realized that just building numbers was not a good idea enough. So you need to talk about what we want to do, what we want to be, but also what the challenges are, and and how to address them if possible. And let me just come to the bottom line of my presentation, which is that what I'm going to try and highlight to you and today is that business as usual will not do. What we have been doing for the last 75 years will simply not do if we want to achieve what we want to achieve by the time India becomes 100 years of independence or 100 years of becoming a republic. So that's my bottom line, and I hope I'll be able to convince you at the end of this half an hour that we need to now think differently as a country and as a people. And the analogy that I very often give is that the Congress party was formed in 1885, and they continue to do whatever they continue to do under very amazing leadership of that time with all the people who were there. But it was the coming of Mahatma Gandhi and his Quit India call in 1942 which changed everything and changed the way Indians started to look at their independence and their desire for independence. And once the Indians, this got pervasive, the rest is, as it was just 5 years, it took to, for this to change. So that's the kind of change that we are thinking about. So let me, so why now today, why am I talking about this today? And I think because it's a very propitious moment for India, both domestically and globally. Because, since 1991, we have continued with these reforms. The direction has remained the same, and there have been some slows and ups and downs, etc. But thankfully, despite the change of regimes, despite different parties coming to power, coalitions, etc., that hasn't wavered, that hasn't changed. And as the introduction said, I was fortunate enough, to be a part of that since 1991, and these reforms have gathered pace over time, and especially, and I say this without being partisan, as it were, that in the last 9 years, and I've been a part of this government for the 5 years, these reforms have actually, taken pace in a very big way. And a lot of things which we were not able to do were done in these 9 years, as you can see here, by the sort of acronyms that you got here. These are some of amazing, changes and reforms that we've done, and the digital public infrastructure under UPI, the passing of the GST, the India Stack, the electric vehicle movement, renewable energy, etc. And then you've got all the other figures that you've got on the right hand side. You can see that the world India today is a very different India than what you had 9 years ago. It has remarkably changed, and this is to me the foundation for the kind of change that we want to have, the trajectory that we want to change here. And 97% of households today have banks, and 79 women household bankers are there. The Jam Trinity, 313 government schemes transferred, so that 2.5 lakh crore of rupees are transferred directly to bank accounts, so that the complaint that Mr. Rajiv Gandhi had made, genuine complaint that only 10 or 15% reach the beneficiary, that's changed also at the same time. So there are these, and then the private NPAs, the gross NPAs have gone down, etc. I don't want to repeat what is said here, but it is really a new India which is emerging, and the foundations of that has been laid very strongly, and that's what the propitious movement for the domestic conditions are. And then moreover, the macroeconomic stability, this government has been committed to it. Despite the pandemic, it hasn't let fiscal deficit drip. It has continued. The RBI has the freedom. The government adopted its inflation targeting rule, which was hanging fire for a long time. And so the RBI is therefore autonomous in maintaining monetary stability. The government has shown a lot of prudence for fiscal stability. Our internal debt, which is now 83%, has come down from 88%. It's still higher than what the N.K. Singh committee recommended as 60%, but at least we are committed to that downward path as we are going forward. But 9% combined fiscal deficit of the central and state government is still far too high, and that's what we need to talk about more about. But very importantly, the external debt to GDP ratio is just 19%. And that's extremely important, because when I joined the government in 1991, we had a half a decade, the latter 80s, where the external debt had ripped in trying to push the growth forward, under Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, and that what resulted in the external debt crisis, which saw Mr. Venkataraman going off with the plane with 400 tons of gold, so that India wouldn't default. So that's something that we've always been in our mind. Foreign exchange reserves, very comfortable current account deficit. Structurally, we are a current account deficit economy. We can try and change it, but it will take a lot of effort. But nonetheless, it's been reasonably well managed. But the more important part is here on the other side, the demographic dividend. 67% of population now in working age. By 2047, India's working age population would be 800 million, combined, more than US, Japan, and China. And our labor force, will be 1 billion by 2030, and then the scope is huge because still 49% of our people are in the working population. That's the participation rate. 51% of people are so-called self-employed. Now these are people whose productivity levels are extremely low. They are people who are sitting with their thelas and their ladies and under the tree, etc., so-called. And so, and that needs to be brought into the formal, labor market. And imagine the kind of productivity increases that you can get if you brought that along with the technology. And even more important, perhaps, is the very low female labor participation rate, 24%. In countries like China and Japan, China and Korea, it's north of 70%. And so that's again a very big potential that we've got here. So now we need to move very quickly on this, because after 2045 or so, our aging will start. Because in the southern states, as you know, are already below the replacement rates, the 6 of them, and this is going to catch up, and the number of children increase is already pretty much stagnating now, and therefore the plus 60 cohort like mine would start increasing, and so therefore we have a short window here of 20 years. And then finally, and which is, I've been a part of this in the Niti Aayog, we've had these champions of change. Here we have got the Atal Innovation Mission, we've got the Startup Mission, the 108 unicorns of May 23. It's a completely different world, there. And these young people, if you meet, with their ideas and with their, thought process and their ambition, is actually quite, very different from what I grew up with in the 70s and the 60s and so on. And they, I think, are the future. They will be the ones who will probably be able to break the monopolies that sometimes we think are characterizing the Indian economy. And I think there's a lot of hope in those unicorns that we got. And also the global conditions are as, I think Shankaracharya has written a nice piece in Business Standard yesterday, talked about how sweet is the Indian spot. How we're saying that India is in a very sweet spot globally, but it's a fact, and he also has not been able to deny it, except to say that, look, watch out, the US and China can even come together into what we sometimes call a messy duopoly, and so the assumption that this thing will continue to accelerate or exaggerate, and the US-China conflict will be the sort of high point for the global conditions may not happen. But I think that Shankar's wish or forecast will not happen, at least for the next 20 years. With the next 20 years, China will challenge the hegemon. China wants to become at par with the US, and that means that there will be this tension, and therefore the friend-shoring or the reshoring or the China or the de-risking of the China national risk will continue to happen, and we can benefit from that under the China plus one the strategy that the countries are adopting. This is why also you got the rising geostrategic advantage for India, and again we are now finally moving forward with trying to sign as many bilateral and regional trade agreements as we can. We walked out of the RCEP after 7 years of negotiations, which I think was not a great idea. But nonetheless, now the India-Africa Growth Corridor and all of the other initiatives, I think, can bring us back into the global market. And then I must emphasize the the role of the Indian diaspora, not only because MR is here, but even otherwise. 3 million of them, and in most amazing positions all over the world, and they literally are all over the world, Australia, US, and I found them even in Japan, and there's a Pan IT Association there, Middle East, and they can bring a lot of connections, network, talent, technology to India, and I think that, and this is where Vijay Raghavan, who was the chief scientific officer, principal scientific officer, and we tried very hard in Niti Aayog to float a cabinet note and get a policy approved to try and accelerate the process of getting our diaspora back to help us in our universities, in our research institutions, and so on, which I think is not as good as it can be going forward. So I think all of those together, the domestic conditions and the global conditions, mean that today we have the moment. Today it's India's moment in some ways, and we can seize it, and we should seize it. Because if we miss it, however, then of course the cost could be quite high. So this is why I'm saying that we need to seize the moment, and the word I'm using is that we cannot afford to miss this opportunity. And we can't afford to miss this opportunity, and the tables are there, if you can see. It's quite surprising that in 1990, the Chinese GDP was $396 billion, and we were $326 billion. Our population was slightly smaller, so that our per capita incomes were almost the same. And today, they are 18 trillion, and we are 3.39 trillion. They are 6 times our size. And the difference is simply that from 1990 to now, we have grown at about 6%, 6.1, 6.2%. They did 1990 to 2020, a flat average 10%, and in some years even higher. And that's what the difference, you can see here, shows up. And if this continues, then, and you got the other figures there, exports, you can see that 683.5 trillion. Their current account surplus is more than our total exports. And then steel production, we have a policy which says that we should do 370 million tons in 2035. We will not achieve that. But look at them, 1 billion tons. 70% of the world steel market today is dominated by China. And FDI, yes, we have done better, but we should remember, we should get it in the context of where the Chinese are. And this is a good figure that I have at the bottom of the table, to notice, which is that per capita income in 1990, India and China were both at 6 or 7% of the global average per capita income. And today, we have done well. We have become 18%, so that's 3 times. So that's not bad. But look at China; it's 85% of the global average. So that's why am I saying this? We can't afford it. That if our northern neighbor, if the difference between our northern neighbor and us remains the same or continues to grow, then our own space will not escape being threatened in our own area, in our own space. They have the string of pearls, strategy. They are already active, as you see, in South Asia. South Asia as a region bloc has not taken off. So we need to push as hard as we can today to try and close this gap, because otherwise it will present to us a strategic threat as we go forward. So that's why we can't afford to miss it. So therefore, what are the 4 conditions for us to seize the moment? One is, of course, that our aspiration should be as ambitious as possible. Because let's stop thinking small. Let's try and go for the big thing, and let's see if we can, and why not? And let's, at the same time, I should say this, that ambitious aspiration, but an aspiration which is shared by all the people of the country. And that's the big thing. Otherwise, it remains confined to the elite. And as long as our independence movement remained confined to the elite, we didn't do anything. As soon as the farmer in Noakhali, understood that that's what he was supposed to do, the whole thing changed. That's the one point. The second is the effective management of the triple transition. No other country in the world history has had to grow economically and also manage the environment at the same time. It's our challenge. We have to reduce our carbon footprint and at the same time grow at 8 or 9%, and plus our social transformation, social transition. Our forefathers have decided that we are good enough to do this simultaneously. Everybody else has done this sequentially. You can see from the US history, European history, Chinese current history, etc., that all of them have attempted this sequentially. Many people will tell us also that we are better off if we do it sequentially. Let the economics go first, let the political rights come down, etc. But that's not for us. So that's the second one. The third is India's diversity. And there, 5 years in Niti Aayog, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that one of the lessons that I've learned is that the more centralized you make the decision making, the more ineffective it is in this country. You've got to go down, to the states. Every state should have the fiscal sovereignty, if you like, and the development sovereignty. And now, I think the important thing is that each district of ours, average size of 30 lakh, 3 billion people, is actually as good as another country somewhere. So we can actually, and this was a movement in the 70s that you wanted to do district planning, etc. But but now we have need to revive it, because again today the district collector remains the same creature as it was, as she was in the in the British period, and that has to hold change. So that's the other one. And finally, and this I think perhaps is the most important social change that we want, is that we have to start working on the basis of some shared mutual trust among the principal stakeholders. At the moment, the climate is that of great distrust between the industry and the government and the academia and the civil society. We are not on the same page, the principal stakeholders. We think, each one of us thinks that the other guy is not doing the right thing. And rather than work with each other to take us forward, we just simply, sort of pull in different directions. And this doesn't happen in other countries. Germany, France, Europe, US, it's seamless. The elite works in a seamless manner in there. You won't know the revolving door policy, etc. China, same thing. Japan. We need to change this. How will this happen? This is where I will tell you, come to that. We are trying to do a project in the Pehle India Foundation, where we want to create a platform where all stakeholders can come and speak with each other candidly, honestly, and give a feedback, so that none of us have the tragedy of or the luxury of living in an echo chamber, which is what often we do. We call them echo chambers, call them ivory towers, but that needs to be changed, and those are the 4 conditions that we go forward. So what is our ambitious aspiration? And you got one on the left hand, which is the purchasing power parity, and then the nominal GDP terms. And my sort of attempt at giving us an emotive target is that in 1850, according to Angus Madison, India had 18% of the global economy. That was our share. Remember, please, in the first century AD, it was 30%. And China's at that time was 27. And then Chinese rose and we came down 17%. But 1850, there's no doubt that it was 18%. Our population share, I think, was 16% at that time. By the time the Brits left, it had come down to 2.5%. And I'm proposing that why can't we target for ourselves that at the end of 100 years of our independence and independent development, we can go back to having that same 18% of the global economy. Not easy, fairly easy in purchasing power parity terms, as you can see here. If you can grow at about 6.2%, you can get there in somewhat. But purchasing power parity is is a very nice economist tool, an academic tool, etc. But it doesn't matter at all in the real world. Because in the real world, what matters is hard power, and hard power means nominal exchange, dollar-driven economy, etc. And that's on your other side, which is the nominal economy. And there you can see that today, to become, the UN projects that in 2050, the world economy will be about $200 trillion nominal. So you got to be $36 trillion to get 18%. You are at 3.39. A simple compound growth rate calculation will tell you that you'll have to grow at 9% plus to reach there. Now that's the aspiration that you got to have. And that's, sorry.
What's the world GDP today?
World GDP 100 billion, 100 trillion, 100 trillion. It's 100 trillion in nominal terms. In PPP terms, it's half of 268. That's the way it is. But the point, the important thing, however, is that if you notice that if you grow not at 9.7 or 9.6%, at 6% growth from now until 2050, we will be, our economy from $3.9 trillion will become about $15 trillion. That's less than what China is already today at $18 trillion. That's how much the gap would be. The Chinese, if they grow only at 4%, will be $51 trillion by that time. They will be the largest economy in any case in the next 20 years. So, at 15 and 51, we'll still be 1/3, 1/4 of the Chinese economy. And therefore, at 9 trillion, however, we will become about $31, $32 trillion. And the Chinese would be, and at 10%, and many people, and I was in CII, many industry friends of ours will tell you that India has the potential to grow at 10%. If you support the private enterprise, if the government works in the service of the private enterprise and supports it. And India has always been, ladies and gentlemen, a private sector driven economy for ages, for centuries. We have never depended on the government. It's been a recent phenomena that the government is seen to be the driver of the development of the growth phenomena. If we grow at 10%, we'll be 40 trillion. But 10% is not easy. But nonetheless, 6% is just simply not good enough. So at 6%, we will be the fastest growing large economy in the world. But for meeting our own aspirations and ambitions, and as I have titled one of my books, the exploding aspirations of our young people, 6% will not take us anywhere at all, in my view. And not only that, but it will pose, as I say, an existential threat, to ourselves if we don't do that. So that's the ambitious target. But then, of course, the challenges are huge. And I need to point this out very candidly. There are 5 of them that I like to emphasize, and there I'm sure many more. The first one I've already referred to. We are the only country in the human history which will have to grow at 7, 8, 9, 10%. GDP growth, therefore per capita income of at least the same amount. Population is going to stabilize soon, but with a reduced carbon footprint. 2070 net zero, amazingly difficult target. And you need to think through this one. Renewable energy, solar and wind, seasonal fluctuations, what do you do with the storage technology? Do you have that? What do you do with this grid transmission, etc. So, green energy transition. Whether you want to go to green hydrogen, if you want to go to green hydrogen, where would you get the electrolyzers from? How would you use the water? Is desalination an issue? Then if so on and so on. But the whole new ball game has to start here. And then again, for example, something that I have pushed very hard in Niti Aayog, and I'm thrilled to see that the Prime Minister has supported it fully after being hesitant in the beginning, was the shift from chemical farming to zero chemical farming. Because when you do chemical farming, you push fertilizer into the soil, you push carbon out into the atmosphere. Our carbon content of our soil was 2.5% in 1947. This is Institute of Soil Sciences in Bhopal. 1.5% is required to keep the soil arable. We are today, friends, watch it, 0.4% carbon content. We've converted our land into a bit of a desert, if you like, and just more and more fertilizer, declining marginal product of the fertilizer. And if you shift away from that to what I call natural farming, which is also zero chemical farming, the carbon content of the soil actually increases. There are studies now from agriculture universities, the Parmar University in Himachal, the Hisar University, etc. And that can become the world's largest carbon sequestration program, if you like. And therefore, this is why the Germans, of all things, their own parliament, sanctioned a grant of 30 million euros to a former IAS officer called Mr. T. Vijay Kumar, who is doing this in the West Godavari district, and there are 22 lakh farmers who are doing this. So that's the first, the environment challenge. The second is the employment challenge. Robotization, AI, all of that the technological revolution, which more and more people are talking about, will kill more jobs and generate more jobs. People have said that earlier about other technological revolutions also, but now it seems that because of the replacement not of just the routine mental activity but also the complex mental activity by deep learning and and so on, you may find that there are very few jobs which are secure for us. We as a professors, academic, etc., we might be well in the danger of losing our job, because now you can get you try ChatGPT and they'll give you a course in economics in about 20 minutes flat, full course. So therefore I can see thank God that I'm not being redundant. But the more important issue for me, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. People recognize this, that in our country the migration-based model of employment will not work. All throughout the history, employment has been generated, employment has happened by people moving to areas where growth is happening. From Europe they went to America, from within Europe they went from Central Europe to West Europe. China, 400 million people or more moved from the coastline to the central district and the western district at every Chinese lunar year. It started here also. And if you look at the Chhat festival, for example, there's a huge movement from the south and the west to the north and the east, and special trains are run. And Amitabh Kundu and others who do work on migration say that there are about 40 million migrants in this country, in all these places, especially, and that's the migration movement, the northeast to the southwest. 40 million. You think if you multiply by 10, if it was 10x, we'll be able to maintain it as a social fabric? Will our social fabric sustain it? Are we capable of doing that? And why am I raising this question is that our diversity is so huge, our diversity is so ingrained, and thank God for it, because that's our biggest strength. But that also means that we today have to generate jobs where people live, and not just keep moving this model, going on to this model. And that's a big challenge. President Kalam started this with Professor Indresan. They came up with Pura. But let's think through that. Again, requires a completely different way of thinking. Massive diversity, Goa and Bihar 10-1. Can you afford this regional diversity to carry on, continue? If not, what's the way out? Is the Finance Commission the only way out, by allocating more central resources? Or do you have to start thinking in other ways of building the infrastructure, of connectivity, etc., in some areas? But that's a big challenge here. And then the lack of inclusion. This is again, and the next one is also the income inequality is similar. Not us, not me, but Francois Bourgogne, who was the chief economist of the World Bank, had said that it's time now to stop measuring the growth of GDP, and it's time now to start measuring the growth of the per capita income of the last decile of the population, because that's what is important. Because unless you do that, and this inequity keeps rising and your Gini coefficient keeps becoming worse, I think you have a problem on your hand. And I think that's what we need to think through. So these 5 challenges, ladies and gentlemen, are so humongous that if we don't think differently, if we don't, as I said, necessitates an innovative India-specific way forward, business as usual will simply not do. Now here because I'm in an academic institute, and I was mentioning this to Gopal and MR on our way, even theoretically we have to start thinking differently. Is profit maximization going to remain the criteria for industrial growth, capitalist growth, firm growth? No, because everybody is now talking ESG. I think Rifkin is the man who started BlackRock, the largest private equity firm in the country. He is openly saying that today you cannot do only financial profit making. You've got to think environment, social and governance. And are we prepared? That must lead to a completely new theory of managerial economics, of industrial economics, of theory of the behavior of the firm. Firm cannot be a profit maximizer any longer. But that's what we were handed down. So what should be the firm doing? How should it be? What should be its objective function? And then once we define that objective function, then we would know what the drivers of that function are. Similarly, and that's why I start off this with the Kabir's Doha, कि जब आवे संतोष धन सब जन धूर समान. Our tradition is that of saying that satisfaction is the highest level of achievement, not the chase after material consumption. If you take that seriously, the Benthamite theory of maximizing utility comes apart. Because we are not going to be running after consumption, and therefore this whole economic science definition, that of being unlimited demands and limited means, can change. And in this day of environment challenge, in this day when we know that we cannot afford to ruin our nature again, maybe today the Indian tradition of being with the nature and coming, and being, leading to what I call rational demands is a better way, better model. But then that will change your entire theoretical basis of the economic. So I am saying this simply because those are two very specific Indian models, and that is the kind of thing that you need to think through in this. That's so. Therefore, this is one, of course, but one of the ways forward is that we say that we will achieve the human development indicators that are achieved by the OECD countries at a much lower per capita income. And that would mean a whole change in the way governance is done. That will mean that will require a change in the share of public goods and services in your consumption basket. The Scandinavian model, if you like, to a certain extent, but at a very high level, of per capita income. But Kerala has shown the way in that respect. And it is saying as a model. Can we think of that? We can think about, how to include natural capital depletion in our calculation of GDP. We can think about, generating jobs while people reside using I put down all these things here, that those are the ways we have to think through if we want to achieve the kind of growth rate that we want to have, and at the same time define what I call a gross welfare product. Let's try and think through this and say, we don't want to do GDP. We're not in the business of running after GDP growth rate. We want to do gross welfare product. And these can be the components of that gross welfare product. Growth in per capita income for sure, progress towards achieving net zero, which is that you now start estimating gross environment product. There are some academicians, Purnima, Dasgupta, etc., who are doing this. Third, the educational benchmarks, because that's of course extremely important. The health indicators, the fact of 35% of our children being undernourished, 50% of our women being anemic, and 270 million children being exposed to lead. All of that has to be brought in somewhere. GDP doesn't capture any of that. So why not? And then access to public services. Because I think that's probably the hallmark of a developed society, of a civilized society, if you like, as to what is the availability, the access of public goods and services. Public education. I've always been a votary of compulsory and free second education up to secondary level. So that at least is the minimum for us to come together. That defines the equality of opportunity for everybody. Because if that doesn't happen, and the trend today that is going on is actually creating more inequities than otherwise. And then the DPI, which is already happening, which is the digital public infrastructure. That's been one of the most democratizing things that you've had. All of us have a phone, and now we can do whatever. And the last one is the lowest decile growth in per capita income. This aligns itself very well with the Antyodaya program, because that's what Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji also talked about. But nobody took it seriously. I'm afraid I can say this, having been a part of the government, that not even BJP takes it seriously. But he said it about 3 decades ago. If we had put our minds to that, we would have been a different economy, a different country by far. But this is the time, this is the thing to do. And the Madras School of Economics can be the place which can come up with an index of gross welfare product, which has all these 6 components, differently weighted. You may like to weight them as you like, higher for the GDP, whatever, etc. But then come up with a number, that this is this is what I'm trying to maximize. This is what I'm trying to grow. And that will lead, friends, to a completely new way of thinking amongst us. And that, I think, that's the order of challenge that we need to have if we want to have Bharat at 100 the way that we want to. So this is what we have done in Pehle India Foundation. We started a project called the Bharat at 100, which wants to create this platform. We will not publish a book on it. We'll create a platform, and we'll create a platform where all of these things are happening, coming together. People thinking differently will be brought together. People who are doing some things differently. Like, for example, I met somebody yesterday, amazing, from Bangalore, who has created a machine called Cytotron, which cures cancer without any invasive surgery and so on, through using physics, radio waves, as it were, to things like that. So we'll bring all of we want to bring all of them together on this platform, then to be able to scale and replicate those and spread them across the country, so that our country becomes the place where new ideas not only get churned, not only get born, but also churn and get disseminated. It's a massive task, but I'm hoping that we'll create this societal platform. We don't want any government money out of this, because I think what we need is a parallel societal platform which will be able to show the way, but also give the feedback to the government as to where we are and how far we are going. To begin with, and this is what the 4 strategic objectives that we want to achieve by this platform: a national vision, societal listening platform. Because I used to always describe Niti Aayog as a funnel, with its mouth towards the society, and then putting in it good ideas into the line ministries. I would like to have this platform also as a societal platform, and disseminate findings among the leadership. That once you've got some findings, you disseminate them at every level, as I said, not just the central government, but the state government, and perhaps even go and find our ways to the municipal corporation and say, for example, just if Indore is a good example of a well-run municipal corporation, and if Pune is the same, why can't we replicate it everywhere else? Why isn't it happening? What's stopping it? It requires a systemic change, and this platform is thinking about doing that. And then findings, not just in English, not just to 10% of us, but in regional languages. Because that will then make development a public movement. And that's what is required, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, you require to make development a public movement, and then the constant updating. To begin with, we have identified for ourselves these 13 sectors, at the core of which is growth with climate, environment, and sustainability. And then you've got the macro variables on the outer perimeter, and then you've got the functional, sectors in the middle sector. And these are 13 of them. It includes, if I just go down, the macroeconomics, the science and technology, governance and judicial reforms, equity, and global political economy. In the functional sector, you got health and education being given the prime place, because human resources are our greatest strength, and therefore they depend on health and education the better we can be. And then there are others there you got, and just one I mentioned already, which is agriculture and how you want to change that. 48% of our people working in agriculture, producing 18% of GDP, is just simply not on. So the whole model has to change, with agro-processing, exports, warehouses, etc., etc. But the more important one also is urbanization. The model of urbanization that we have followed so far. 400 million people will be urbanized in this country in the next 3 decades. If we carry on the same way that we have done so far, bye-bye planet, if you like, because there will be nothing left. So we need to do it very differently. So all of these things, as I said, my attempt in this talk has been to say that India can achieve its share back in the global economy at 18%, but for that we need a huge effort, a huge collective effort, and that effort must be focused on doing things completely differently than what we have done so far. In the status quo and business as usual will simply not work. Yes, it's a big task, but then there must be a time where this task should begin. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you for that interesting and very innovative solution for Bharat at 100. Floor is now open for questions. I would request you to raise your hand. The mics will reach you, and then you could please introduce yourself and then put for your questions. I would request that please do not make statements. Please do ask questions so that our learned speaker can respond. Mike over here, please.
Thank you, sir, for opportunity and for your erudite lecture. I have many questions, but it will be undemocratic to ask all, but I will constrain it with 3. The first question is, after all, the GDP corresponds to the utilization of finance, and our Minister of Finance in Tamil Nadu has stated that the share of the states from the Finance Commission is reducing over the years. Now, as you say, decentralization, it concurs with the subject that this is contra to the development. What is your opinion on that one? Secondly, as you rightly said, the migration is not good. But Dr. Abdul Kalam also has got the plan of Pura, providing urban facilities in rural areas. I asked the same question to him in the Vivekananda Auditorium in the Anna University, but I did not get the answer. But the union government is acting against this. As you rightly said, the migration of the rural people to the cities are more. It is not, natural. It is, by policies, it is decided by the union government to provide cheap labor to the construction industry and then skilled and semi-skilled labor for the industries to the advantage of the corporates. My third question is, in comparison of this GDP in the world countries, financial pundits, they take conveniently either the nominal GDP or PPP, power purchase parity. What is the right one to approach to measure it rightly?
So the answer to the third question first, because that's the simplest. I would rather measure the GDP or the per capita income of the last decile of every country, and start a new movement there. I'm not interested in overall GDP, etc., because the income distribution, the inequity is so high in many times that it doesn't define in any sense the actual condition of the living of the people. So why not start a movement, as the World Bank chief economist has suggested, that let's measure the growth in the per capita income of the last decile of every country and then rank the country accordingly. Now, for example, today US is the largest economy, it hasn't got the highest per capita income, but its share of poverty is still very high. If you compare it to Europe, I mean, I've forgotten those figures, but the number of poor people who are living below acceptable living standards in the US is, I think, 3 times that of Europe, something like that. Now so how does it matter if the US is the largest economy in the world, if it's if about that many people? So that's the first part. But as I said, you can keep measuring both, but in real global terms, now this is the second part of the answer. If you want to compare yourself in comprehensive national power, as it is called these days, nominal GDP is the way to measure it. If you want to still measure the GDP, as I've suggested. The second question about Pura. Now, I mentioned that in my talk. The problem with us so far has been that most of us know what to do, but we are not discussing how to do it. And the same thing has happened with Pura. Everybody said it's a great idea. Indrasan was a very good friend of mine. We tried to develop it, but nobody took that next step to say that, look, how do we want to do this? Because Pura is a different concept of urbanization, right? Some people took it to the other side and said, look, let's go to the Gandhian aspect, Nanaji Deshmukh, just create rural communities and so on. But that was not the thought. This can happen only if you decentralize decision making. Let's say you tell the district magistrate, or call him whatever, and say that, look, you need to make sure that the urban facilities that you have in your district town should be available to all the talukas. That, if you decentralize that, that's one way forward. I mean, other people will think of many other ways forward, but we need to discuss the how of all of these things. And the first question about the state finances, is it the 15th or the 14th Finance Commission, 15th I think, no, 14th, which already did shift, up to 41% or 42% of the change, to the because the present Prime Minister, having been the Chief Minister, was also at the receiving end and therefore knew what was going on. The problem is that this will not solve the problem. The solution is in the states making much better effort at raising their own revenues, and which is not done. So the self-revenues, you can't just depend on the central transfer. You have to raise your own revenues. There are a large number of methods that you can do it, and you can, and that will be the only way for the states to exercise what is sometimes referred as fiscal sovereignty, because that needs to be done. So otherwise, you see, that kitty is almost fixed, because those are dependent on the tax. One example, and I'll end with it. Every state has a very large number of almost non-functioning or dysfunctioning public sector corporations and enterprises. Why should they stay there? Has anybody made an estimate of the assets that are there in the public sector? The prized land and so on and so forth, and their utility. All of that can become part of state revenues if you want, and can generate a lot of revenue. Prime land in the center of major cities is sitting there, not being used. But the state government will not do anything about it. Why not? I started this process in Niti Aayog. Sure enough, there's a nice pushback from everybody. So not yet been done. But has to be. Imagine the number of state government enterprises and corporations. Why one MP came to me, let me not go on.
Yes, sir.
Sir, myself Murli Krishnan from Chennai. Thanks for your wonderful and brainstorming presentation. Sir, in that in your fifth slide, but the challenges are huge, yet can be overcome. In that you mentioned about income inequality. Most of the economists from the government side, they will not accept it. In the forum, they will not accept that income inequality. But they were the first person accepted income inequality in that forum actually. Thanks for that actually. And that,
I didn't understand the question. Sorry.
He's coming to the question, sir. He's not yet come to the question.
Okay.
In that India innovative slide, in that fourth point, adapting a bottom-up estimation methodology, do you have any model on that, sir?
Please repeat it.
Model of what?
In the India innovative way slide, no sir. In that fourth point, you have mentioned like adapting a bottom-up estimation methodology.
Bottom-up estimation methodology.
But that's
Decentralized, district decentralized.
Yeah.
Do you have any models?
We are actually trying to do this already. We had, in Pehle India Foundation, I've got 3 of some of the best statisticians that I could get hold of, and we have created a template for estimating the economic size of the district development product. That's what we are trying to do. We have already got a sanction from the government of Assam to do that for 12 districts. Because for the first time ever, you will get a district level economic, estimation, so that you know what the economic activity in each district is, and then the district collector can be given a KPI to say that this is what your current economic, level is. You've got to raise it to that level in the next, whatever time period you want to give. And that's what you need to do. By the way, the UP government is also trying it. We started this practice with the UP government, but unfortunately first Deloitte came over and took the project away from us. Sorry?
Biodiversity.
Biodiversity.
Balance the biodiversity while doing this.
Of course, you can see that I've already mentioned but that, you see, if you do it at the district level, it'll be far easier and practical to do it. But the problem is that, as I mentioned this yesterday to somebody very senior, who said that, Baba, don't give this another task to the district magistrate. The poor man is got responsible for everything in the world in any case. So you give him one more task, that's all. But what the Chief Minister of Assam has actually done so far, he said that he has changed the basic model of the district collector from saying that you are not responsible for revenue any longer, you're not responsible for your revenue cases any longer. He has deputed other officers for that. Your job is for focusing on the economic development of your district. Now, again, completely new way of thinking, but maybe required today, because I don't see why the colonial model of district administration should continue in our country any longer.
Sure, question
I have
there.
the mic.
But
I
this
have
is a
the-
question that should be discussed in the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy in Mussoorie.
Yeah.
Yeah, on your far right, far back. Okay. So, right here. Yeah. So, thank you for that wonderful presentation. It had great ideas right through.
And your name?
My name is David. But I'm not so sure this government actually listened to some of those ideas, starting from decentralization to begin with.
Starting
Two quick
from?
questions. Starting from decentralization to begin with. Two quick questions. One is you said there is deep distrust between the stakeholders of this economy. I was just wondering why and how can we resolve that? The second quick question is, clearly going forward, it is most likely that the India coalition might win. And there are rumors circulating that the leaders in the present establishment are looking for safe havens outside the country. So in that scenario, would the 18% still hold? Do you think India will move ahead irrespective of whether Modi is there or not? What is your opinion? Do we need
The second question, no comments. Okay, that's a straightforward one. Thank you for asking that. On the first part, whether they will accept recommendations and so on. I've been in the government long enough to know that it's not easy. The government is very often recommendation proof, if you like, But therefore, I've said that I want to start this, I want to create this as a societal platform. And I'm actually convinced that if we start this societal platform and can take it towards making development a public movement, that everybody starts see, if you get decentralized, for example, decision making or accountability, that will be the first time that the taxpayer or the common person would be able to ask the question to the collector, sir, what happened? This, by the way, has started where have I learned this from? From our experience of the 5 years in aspirational district program. The Prime Minister told the Niti Aayog, you select the most backward districts in every state and then bring them to the average, to the state average. So we selected 112 and we monitored them on a weekly basis. And we visited, incredible, by the way, the district administration is a place that you should just absolutely visit. The number of people they've got, the number of people who don't know what they're doing, the number of data which are conflicting, with each other. They'll give you one data, the others will completely conflict with the other and so on. But we learnt in the aspirational district that once the district administrator, the collector, had to put his targets on a board somewhere, the questioning had started. The questioning had started. And that's what you need to do. And we did that in the aspirational districts. So if you can do it in 100, out of the 112, not all of them did that, but we did them at least, I think, about 40 we succeeded. And, they've come up. Do it in 40, you can do it in 730. But then there has to be somebody to lead this effort, to say that this got to be scaled up. Now, this must start with, and we got enough people in this, in our society. We've got enough people, who can lead the 2% theory works, that if 2% of us, start believing in this, the change will happen. Or the 80-20 you may like or whatever. I believe in the 2%. Yeah.
There's a question from here, sir.
My first question on distrust.
Distrust.
Distrust,
Between stakeholders.
because it's a long answer. I don't want to give it. I just want to say that it's time that we started changing that. Because the point is that distrust is complete. And that distrust is because of every stakeholder. The blame cannot be put on anybody else. Because I've worked in the industry organizations and I've seen it very close quarters, how the industry behaves. I worked in the government long enough to know as to how government, treats the industry, and how it's nice to have, top industrialists sitting outside your door, etc. And I've worked also. I've got an NGO. I've worked otherwise. I've seen also that as to how the civic society believes that nobody else but them are the God's own, truth. So all of that. But it starts. What you need to do is to make a beginning somewhere and start making the change. And I think that change must happen. Now, how it will happen, I don't have the answer. If I did, we need to work. We need to work, but we need to work at it at, I think, at the micro level. At the micro level, just start here, and create some body which will bring people together. And I think, but finally, the only thing is that let's start this as a, as a Chatham House rule, as they say. As a whatever you discuss will not go out of that room. We start that. Maybe the trust will develop slowly and gradually. Yeah.
You had a question.
Thank you, sir. This is Ampa Palaniappan. I'm from Chennai. I think the wish of 10% growth going to 18% thing, I think is, my point was in terms of the travel and tourism industry. A lot of countries live on travel and tourism industry, but I think that's one of the least priority in our country, because how much of it, I think, and growing in that can be much faster than most other industries. The gestation period, all that is, and we have the culture, we have snow, we have everything in the country. So how much of it, and how is that, the plan which you had in your experience, how do you think that can be taken forward to help the 10% growth?
Yeah. So let me just broaden the question and answer, which is that to say that we have not focused enough on the contribution of the services sector to our growth. We keep talking about 25% share of manufacturing, and so on and so forth. But health, education, and tourism can be the three very dynamic sectors of this country. And that is also, and we will tackle it. Again, by the way, let me first also say that, again, that's a issue that is well known, and the Prime Minister has repeatedly talked about it. Let's create tourist circuits, Buddhist circuit, Christian circuit, this, that, and the other. But and infrastructure, the tourist infrastructure and all of that. But we haven't yet figured out the how of it. Again, it is best left, I think, at the state level, because a successful tourism policy for Tamil Nadu will be very different from a successful tourist policy from Assam. It will require a very different set of conditions and infrastructure. Similarly, for export policies, I've asked actually the Minister for Commerce, Piyush Goyal, as to how can the same export policy work for the Punjab, which is double landlocked, and for Orissa, which has a tradition of trading and exporting going back millennia. They were trading with the Chinese up the Irrawaddy in the 18th century. So we need this state-specific, blueprints for each one of these things. And same goes for tourism. Last word is that tourism is a part of the solution of generating jobs where people are. That's the most important, the most important part of tourism. And then now ESG. So if you create, for example, if you generated this structure around Sanchi, where I recently, this is why it's in my mind, it can be the amazing employment generator, and the infrastructure will come up, and the nature can be taken care of. And there are so many places like that all over our country. But we need that decentralized thinking. And here again, the stakeholders think that if, for example, let's say in this state, if the government and the industry and the civic society all came together and said, we have defined these 8 places, and let's work together to create them, that will be the best model to take it forward. And why can't it happen? And it doesn't happen because we believe that the government will do everything. And as I said earlier, and I repeat myself, this country has never been a government-led country. There's always been, and we need to take that back. We as a society need to take that role back into our hands. So that's the. That's
Mr. Vaidya, you had a question?
I had a question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Your name?
With changing models of GDP
Name?
or can you hear me?
Yeah, I just want to know your name.
Oh, sorry. My name is Alok. I'm a software consultant.
You're a?
Software consultant.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So with the changing models of GDP, with the changes in economy, right? Data is the new currency. So can you comment a little bit about how do we systematically capture data with timeliness, transparency, integrity, which can be usable by. So US, for instance, they have the wonderful data.gov portal where they publish high quality data, right? And there are some initiatives in India as well. But can you comment on how can we improve this? And a second question, if I may, there's massive improvements in like artificial intelligence, robotics, wherein the material world has an increasingly very lower cost of marginal, production or marginal cost is increasingly diminishing, right, for material and for services. So in such a like a futuristic world. I mean, you already indicated that what are the things that you want to measure, like satisfaction and so on. But is that something which is measurable? Can you comment on like how would you measure that?
Yeah. On the first part, I'll direct you only to the efforts that are going on. It was started by, and when I was there in Niti Aayog, we are putting up one of the, I think, by far the best quality data portal under Niti Aayog. And we had to do this in consultation with MeitY and with the NSO, with the CSO, Central Statistics Organization, because the whole data thing comes under the Ministry of IT or something like that. There's a big organization, no, which, what is it called? Anyway, but yes, we did that, and we are doing that with partnership of the private sector. We're getting the best experts, domain experts there, and cleaning up the data and making and giving the ability to triangulate the data, so that the data can speak to us much better. So there is a lot of work going on there. I think there's a portal whose name I forget, but I know the name of the officer. If you're interested, Anna Roy, contact her, and she is leading the effort. But it's on, and all of us, I think, in the country recognize the importance of data. In that even the new oil, new currency, whatever, so it is going to be data-driven economy. And the more important thing, moreover, is that the amazing work being done by people like iSpirit, a group of volunteers in Bangalore, led by Sharad Sharma and others, who are, by the way, at the foundation of UPI, and the digital public infrastructure. They are taking that a step forward by creating the data analytical capabilities. Once you collect the data, what do you do? And you see this happening in many areas, the effect of that already happening. So that's that. On the other one, about measuring, I'm not sure that you want to measure everything, but at least let's make the start with gross welfare product, and then you can have a qualitative dimension of, asking if you are going to do a survey, you can ask people what the trade-off is between leisure and work is, and how they, and you can, again, this is the new way of thinking. Nobody talks about this. We notice it all the time. At least in my hometown, Lucknow, I know that by the time it's 5 o'clock in the evening or 4 o'clock, if the guy, the rickshawala, has had 4 or 5 enough fares, he'll quote you a price which is astronomical, because he doesn't want to do it anymore. What does that reflect? That reflects the trade-off between leisure and work. Now his trade-off is at that level. Now, so if you ask the question, they'll tell you that, for me this much is enough. But we need to start, it's a very different way of working. Because the moment we think that your disposable income is the only measure of your welfare, may not be. By the way, a very good empirical evidence of that is coming out of a firm called Team Lease, India, in Bangalore again, which has had an IPO, amazing guy, Manish Sabarwal, Harvard graduate also. And he tells you that people are accepting 30% less salary if you give them a job at home than to come into towns. And that, what is that? That's a measure of your trade-off, isn't it? That you like a family. Again, to repeat, to tell you, today is becoming a human right issue for migrations. Why should there be some set of people who would only meet their family twice a year?
I think we are considering it in Australia. The right to work from home, they are considering it in Australia.
Well, right to work from home is only for you guys, I mean, not all of us have that luxury,
Do look up data.gov.in. That's a single portal which gives you a comprehensive view of data. Yeah. Mr. Vaidya, please.
Adam,
quick-
please.
Thank you. So were you looking at some 33% representation or something like that? Yeah. So I just want to start off with the first question.
Didn't get your name.
Sorry. My name is Aruna and I work in the non-profit sector.
Okay.
So when you started off, you made this distinction between Bharat and India. You said think Bharat and not India. Is there a dichotomy there? I could not, and I thought you were going to explain that, but I didn't get it. So that's one point. The second thing is that something that is always perplexing is capital chases profit. And we can keep talking about ESG and all that. Ultimately, you're looking at all these unicorns and where money is chasing these companies just to build scale. So in a country like India, where we keep saying that let the local stay local and let them not move, why should we be building the scale and largeness of corporates? Why, I'm not saying go back to the basics of make your stuff and live, but can economies focus more on small and medium sectors so that your growth is more distributed and equitable rather than growing a lot of hollow, empty, large brands? That is something that's always perplexing. Why are the governments not focusing on that? And then the last thing that I always say is, wanted to ask was this about, you said that there is mistrust. Now, let's talk about vision for the country. That's what you have. If government has a vision, does government do anything at all to get us to buy into that vision? Is the vision of the people the same as the government? So there is that huge dichotomy there, but are we doing anything to resolve that at all?
You give me the mic. So on the first question, I thought I'd explained it, but let me quantify it. India is 10% of the population, which works in the formal sector, or 20% at best. The Arjun Sen Gupta committee said that the informal sector of the government, of the population, is at least 80%, if not more. And the people who work, who are in the formal sector, who get a regular salary, who are into the housing, etc., that's India. Yeah, India is also that which reads the English newspapers, which is about 10%, etc. Bharat is all that there, which is out of this. This is the informal sector in the cities. These are 60% of people in Delhi live in slums, or in jhuggi jhopadis. That's the Bharat. The Bharat is the 48% in the rural India, which produces, as I said, only 18% of the GDP, and therefore they don't, they are not part of this growth phenomena. So this Bharat in India is, if you like, the very, in a very odd way. I think that's the best way to define it: formal versus informal. All of those whose future incomes are not assured, and whose the growth of their next generation is not assured, is Bharat. The rest are India. We are India, of course. Yeah. So that's the one thing, and that has to be taken care of. Because if that doesn't happen, then whatever you do, you will never achieve your aspiration. And by the way, that's also the definition. There should be the definition of a civilized, developed economy. That the last person on the so that's that. Second, the question that you asked was on trust, right? Trust and scale, yeah. Capital. You see, I am convinced that capital will have to stop chasing profits. The time has come. It's already there. The current phrase that is being used all over the world is that you've got to do well by doing good. You just can't do well alone. Profits are increasingly going to be looked at, not the only criteria of success. Believe you me, this is beginning to happen. There's a tremendous pressure in Europe and in the US. There's public movement now against companies and corporates who will do only profit maximization and not take care of either the gender equity or the governance or the social aspects, and especially the environment. I mean, after all, demonstrations against BP and Shell and Total and so on are now common. And this is going to catch on in many big ways. So that's passé. Profit maximization is passé. And the distinction between the social rate of return and the private rate of return will continue to narrow. And that's, I think, but then whether it will be achieved by focusing on the SMEs or the large ones, etc., I am not so sure, because the important thing is to ensure that level of productivity to each of us, which gives us a reasonable way of living. And all the SMEs are unable to do so, in my opinion. But the government is working on it. And that's a very big question about how to tackle the growth of the SMEs, etc. By the way, out of the 6 crore SMEs, only 5,000 are those who get access to commercial credit. Now that's the beginning that you can make. On the last one that you said about India's vision and share, I repeat myself. It doesn't matter what the government thinks here. Let's start thinking for ourselves. Why does it matter? Because if we think the way we think, the government will be forced to think, we are of course a democracy, no? So you got to change this. I mean, I said this to Michael Spence, who led the Growth Commission. He's a Nobel laureate. And he came, meeting us, etc., and he was going to China. I said, in China you can go to the talk and 24 people in Beijing, and it will make all the difference. But if you do that here, it will make no difference at all. Because it's us who will make the difference. And I'm telling you this after working at least for 10 years in the government, at pretty good levels and inside. It has to be a societal program. And by the way, the Prime Minister now says it also, which is that the development has to become a public movement. It's not. We think the development is the government's job. It cannot be. It's not. It's never been.
Yes, sir.
I'm Vaidya Subramaniam. The last slide, the gross welfare product, 2 quick questions on that. One thing that was conspicuously missing was the term government itself there. I mean, I'm sure that, we don't want the government to be away from any of this because they are the instrument of welfare. But the last one, you spoke about per capita income, labor participation and all of that, especially the bottom 10%. What's your take on the freebies? Now, is that going to really help that bottom 10% to come up, labor participation to increase? Your count on freebies. And the penultimate point was delivery mechanisms, DPI. What tax reforms do you think will actually bring about a situation where I'm willing to pay more tax if the delivery mechanisms is going to give me more quality service? All the DPI now is on consumerism, retail and all of that. Government services, high quality, I'm willing to pay high tax. Tax reforms, any thoughts on that?
My God.
Shall we take one more question?
Yes.
Sir, you mentioned about lifting the HDI to OECD levels with low per capita, right? Implicit in that statement is delivery of public good by the government, and you also alluded to the Scandinavian model and so on and so forth. Given the fiscal challenges that we are confronted with, and government still leading capital expenditure in the infrastructure sector and public sector to catch up, you think it's a fiscally sustainable proposition? We also slightly related to what Vaidya said, so I thought you could take it together.
And I didn't get your name.
Ramakrishnan.
So can we take this question also, and then you can answer?
As you like.
Yeah.
In your hand.
Sir, this is regarding after the Ukraine war, America just cut off Russia from the SWIFT network. And 2 days or 3 days before, I just read a news, like $26 million of payments which were meant to be done to Russian diamond suppliers were actually blocked by American SWIFT system. And also we know that in August 21st to 23rd, the BRICS summit is also coming up. And they are now likely to come up with a new set of monetary system in which the commodities and manufacturing capacities will be pegged to the basket of currencies. So my question right now is, how do India has to navigate this challenge? Do India needs to align with the SWIFT network? Do they need to align with the Russian SPFS or Chinese CIPS? Or India should focus on internationalization of rupee by signing bilateral trade agreements or cross-border payments? How the settlement has to be done, and how do India park its foreign exchange reserves? Right now, if I am right, we have around 795 tons of gold with this. So what is the requisite level of gold we should keep in our reserves to weather any foreign exchange crisis? As you have mentioned, the world GDP is around 100 trillion, but the depth of the world GDP is around 300 trillion. So how do we do that? It's sometimes all this data also puzzles me. Some data, even I have heard that Chinese GDP, debt to GDP is around 350%.
That's Japanese.
It's there, I have
Anyway, yeah, I think this is entire macro 101, 201. I mean, so
Yeah.
I'm afraid I won't be able to tackle it. But I'll try whatever. But on the question that you asked, the government is not there on purpose, and I keep repeating it, because why should the human gross welfare product, the measurement of it, why should that be a government responsibility? It can be yours. We can start this in bring 10 good universities together, 10 good economics departments together. We can do that, and then give it to the government to say that, look, this is what we've done, and let's try and, as I said, we in our very small foundation are trying to measure district development product. For one state we've already started, the other one that, so we can, if we produce that model, if the template works, if it works, then a platform like Pehle India Foundation, we can create 10 more, dozen more, can actually then digitize the thing, can disseminate it through all the means possible so that it gets replicated and scaled. The government doesn't come into the picture at all, does it? The government comes into the picture by saying that, okay, now I will ask my district collector, to adopt this. But the initial thinking, the brainstorming, the thinking, the move forward can all be done here in our society, right? Because, the government is not, the sort of keeper of all talent. A large, huge talent is outside. So that's my answer to your, on the other hand, the thing that you said is that what's missing is the per capita. No.
Government was only an observation, not a question. The concern on labor participation.
Yeah. On the freebie, on the freebie, you see let me put it like this: that freebies is not a sustainable model. That's the best way to put it. It's an electoral model, and what you need to do is to get people into jobs with high productivity, because everybody who is anybody, unless we're now becoming a society of lazy, dole seekers, there is a merit in the people want to be productivity employed. As far as I know, because there is a and that's the way to go. So if let me put it, freebies are a poor substitute for generating jobs at the lowest level of population, and that's what you need to do. So if as the gentleman said, if you generated enough jobs, for example, in the tourism industry, nobody wants to be. Nobody wants a freebie. Ethically, we Indians don't like going out and getting freebies from ourselves. I don't think anybody does, right? And so, as far as I'm concerned, you just got to think through how to accelerate the generation of jobs, employment in this country, and make it much faster than what it is today. And that's the way to go forward. I think that's the answer to your question. On your question, sir, let me be very pragmatic. Let me not start thinking about internationalization of the Indian rupee, etc., etc. There's a long way to go. The Chinese have started thinking about it after they crossed $15 trillion, right? And their trade was more than $2 trillion. We are $690 billion. for God's sakes. Now, why do we want to talk about all of this? It's so premature. Let's just focus on making our exports. But the way to focus it, and I've said this to Mr. Piyush Goyal, so I can tell you, is don't talk about your export volume, etc. Say that you will double the share of your exports in world trade in the next 5 years or 10 years. That's the target to have. Is stuck at 1.67 for goods and 2.8% combined with services for 3 decades. And you want to talk about internationalization of the rupee. Who will want your rupee? If you're a structurally current account deficit economy, you are the borrower, no? Why would your rupee be internationalized? Yeah, you will internationalize it in Nepal, Bhutan and Sri Lanka. But that's all right. And that anyways happening. Doesn't need government intervention. Right? Anyway you go, that your currency is accepted. So let it keep it at that. And by that, until that happens, you're better off, being a part of the SWIFT, being a part of the dollar, whatever. About gold, by the way, there's already a rush in buying gold. Huh? All the central banks are buying gold. So this is not the right time because the price is going up. So let's wait for a while and then. But again, they're a very big issue. Very big issue. Again, we know it, we can't find the answer. India is the repository of 25,000 tons of gold in this country. It's all there, here. And the government has been unable to monetize it. Why can't we find a way of doing that? If we do that, the gold bonds have been issued, this, that, but it doesn't work. Why? Because still the very old, centuries old mentality is there, perhaps correctly, that government cannot be depended upon. So better buy gold and keep it at home. Who knows what happens tomorrow? That needs to change through a societal effort, right? 25,000 tons. Think of, I've spoken to the Gold Council more than once. And in Niti Aayog tried to do this. How to bring this gold into our, in the circulation. It's dead asset, So why do we need any more gold? The central bank shouldn't be buying any more gold, should be getting us to give them the gold. That's my answer to your question.
So I think there are 2 questions by 2 young people. We'll have your question first.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Aditi Srivatsan. I am a student of Sishya OMR School. And I just wanted to say that I found the speech so informative and I loved learning about it, especially as a student of economics. And I have a question relating to something you said. Initially, you had talked about how India is in a great position now because of the diaspora of Indian people and how they're working in various countries and how that is a tool for growth and development because they're spreading, because they're spreading Indian goals. However, you've also stated that artificial intelligence is taking jobs here, about the importance of unicorn startups, and there are also factors such as brain drain. So, in your opinion, sir, what do you think should be a priority? Increasing diaspora and moving tools of development of India abroad, or increasing the amount of skilled and ingenious people staying in India and creating jobs for these people who are unemployed? Because both of them are rather mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Can we have your question too?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. I'm Haider Zaidi. I'm from Sishya OMR again, and I'm in 9th grade. My question was, can you explain how exactly the diversity in India can affect its total national income?
Can we give a round of applause for the young participants? Yeah.
Question I can't answer. On your question, young lady, I don't think there is a trade-off between growing our talent here and bringing and helping the diaspora. But I don't know actually. See, what I think should be happening is the Indian diaspora, who I know because I've met, who is very deeply engaged in India mentally and wants to work here, wants to help, not work here, wants to help in some way or the other. We need to think creatively to actually for them to be able to do so. And there are several schemes in the government, especially in the CSIR network, etc., which have been there, but which haven't produced the result. because very often, again, we as a society, try and push them away rather than attract them here. So if, for example, our universities, just as an example, or our labs, made it very flexible for the Indian professors abroad to come here and spend a few months, term or whatever, on their conditions, not on our conditions, on their conditions. I think there'll be a large number of people who will come here and work with us, and that will really create a new. I'm very sad to say, and sorry, and because I know I'm from a provincial university, Lucknow. Most of our universities are now dead grounds of learning. No learning is happening. Finished because of the quality of the faculty. All of that can be revived. If, for example, I said this to the Lucknow Vice Chancellor, just look at the alumna from Lucknow University who is abroad and make it conducive for them to come to Lucknow University, every year from wherever. The whole thing will change. So this connection between the diaspora, and again, the Chinese have been so good at it. Each province, each what they call it, the county has a roster of people abroad, and they attract them there. We haven't done this very often, and I'm again sad to say that this happens because of our envy. Oh, you've done well, you run away. I have been here, stuck here. So why do you want to come back and make advantage of it? It has to change. Now, how will it? I mean, again, you people, you are the ones who change. So that's my answer. So it's not a trade-off. It's something that can be done in a complementary manner, in a synergistic manner. And that's what we should be trying. And young man, for you, the diversity can add to the GDP very, very well, because if, for example, you can develop a blueprint for growing growing, let's say, the state of Arunachal, at a fast rate, it will be very different. So if each state has a blueprint for growth of 10% plus, it will aggregate to a more than 10% for the whole country. And that's what you need to do. So you've got to plan, you've got to start thinking in terms of the state, because what is good for one state is very often not good for the other one. So you've got to think state specific, and once you start doing that, that diversity will take care, will ensure that your growth will become higher. Yeah?
Good evening, sir. I am Sanjana Satish, and I'm a student at Shishya OMR. And you had mentioned unicorns in your speech, right? So there are unicorns like Byju's and Paytm that have, let down their investors. So do you think that the unicorns should focus on growth with the focus in governance and financial discipline rather than becoming unicorns overnight?
That's my answer. You said it yourself.
No, but from an investor's point of view. From an investor's point of view.
Businesses don't belong anymore.
You should focus much more on what you said rather than burning money is not the way.
So I think we must bring this session to an end, and if there are questions which are still to be asked, I'm sure Sir will be able to answer them. This brings me to a conversation which I, in my earlier avatar, used to have with the private sector. So very enthusiastically go and ask them, what can we do for you? What more do you want? And the answer I got, and this is in Tamil, sir, they said, Summa vitta podum. Just leave us alone. Right? So I think the animal spirits that once people used to talk about is already there, and we know what is to be done. It's not a rocket science, and you were very right in saying that unless development becomes a people's movement and it comes up as a movement from the people, it cannot be thrust down from the top. It has to be a bottoms up and not a top down approach that development will take place. And looking at the government for everything is probably a fallacy that, people actually are not looking for everything, but it is a convenient fall guy to blame. is what I personally think, because people, wherever they have taken the effort, have succeeded. So thank you very much for that fascinating presentation. I'm sure your effort to take it to the people, to make it a people's movement, we would definitely be with you, and I think we will also in the CIC make our own efforts to bring together such thought leadership and then present it to the government at an appropriate stage. Thank you very much, sir.